And we're live.
There we are live, joining the folks at DML, the conference in Irvine, California. So we're very excited to be kicking off the conference right after the keynote that Dana Boyd is just wrapping up with. So let's do quick introductions. Christian, why don't you start from your side?
All right. Well, hi everyone. My name is Christian. I'm based in Hamburg in Germany, and I work with Leuphana University, which is like a provincial small university in Lower Saxony.
Aha.
Hey, man.
Hi, babe. Hi. Hi, Christian. I miss you. Hi, Kate. Hi, Kate. And hi, Helen. Hoda's here to see Helen, but she's going away from her. How was the keynote? I missed it because I was going to
amazing. And it's still going on. They're still doing Q&A.
Yeah. Yeah. I still don't have Wi-Fi. I'm actually on 3G.
Oh,
wow.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So we're just starting introductions.
Yeah. I was on, you guys are live. I'm sorry. I didn't realize.
You go ahead.
Okay. I'll mute so you guys can do the introduction. Sorry. And I'm a professor at North Carolina State University.
And it's your first time on virtually connecting.
It is my first time. So hello, this is my first time.
Why don't we just go through Kate and then AK and Maha?
I don't think we can hear you, Kate.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Start again. So I'm Kate Green. I'm based around near Birmingham, but I work at the University of Nottingham doing my PhD at the moment around online health communities and privacy and trust. So big stuff.
Yeah. We have another addition on this side.
Hi everybody. I'm Justin.
You are?
I'm assistant professor. Comparative media studies.
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you all.
We're just doing some virtual introductions, and then we'll get your feedback on that keynote that she just came out of.
Great.
So back to AK.
All right. Hey everyone. The name's AK. I am at UMass Boston. I am an educational technology troublemaker. That's not my job title, but it maybe will become one day. Not a skeptic. I like to tinker, but I also do take things with a grain of salt. So looking forward to a good conversation.
And Maha. I think her Wi-Fi, her 3G is bumping out on her, so we'll catch her when she comes back in. So it's a pleasure to meet you both. Maybe big news from DML, the conference, and then some insights from the keynote that you just came from.
Big news and insights.
That involves you, doesn't it?
Well, the big news is that for our colleagues in UMass Boston, we'll be at MIT next year, which is awesome. So really excited that MIT will be able to host this gathering next year, which is great. In August 1st through 3rd. So, mark the calendars now.
And I see Chris has jumped in to join us. Welcome.
Hi, Chris.
How you doing?
It's like the hallway conversations at conferences. You never quite know who's going to jump in and join in and engage in the conversation. Sorry for the interruption.
No.
Justin.
No, that's great. What other big news? I don't know. We had a great workshop yesterday.
Oh, we did. We had a wonderful workshop. That's how the three of us met. We were in the same workshop.
Which one of the workshops were you in? There were a couple of different ones that I was following on Twitter.
So ours was about education technology and equity, and particularly trying to think about what would it look like to try to summarize our understanding of education technology and equity and sort of into a set of guiding principles. The idea being that there are venture capitalists, there are philanthropists, there are designers, there are implementers, and you know, that we've sort of we've achieved, and you know, sort of. There's lots that we don't know about education, technology, and equity, but there's an awful lot that we do know that's sort of not widely disseminated among that community. And if there's some way to try to synthesize our knowledge about it, make it accessible to people, so that if you were a new junior developer that was put on the, you know, Google Daydream team and was making sort of VR apps, like what would you want, you know, with the intention of having some of them used in schools and school contexts, like what would you want that person to know and think about as you know, she was starting her work, to be able to have equity as a sort of starting point in mind? Or you know, what questions would you want a philanthropist when they start funding a new personalized learning initiative about education, technology, and equity? So those are the kinds of conversations we were having and trying to, you know, Mimi and I have some starting points that were, maybe Ito, who runs the whole thing, have some starting points on that. But then we invited, you know, super brilliant people like Faye and a whole bunch of other folks to come in and help us think about it and sharpen our thinking. Hey, Maha.
Hello. I think
Hi,
the other big points that we discussed yesterday was, you know, this idea of designing educational technologies with the intention of doing good. And oftentimes there are unintended consequences. And sometimes those unintended consequences means that there is going to be different levels of uneven participation in and amongst different populations, in particularly underrepresented populations, females, rural students, and the like. And so we wanted to talk about, what does equity look like? What are the challenges that different constituencies face in this community? And what are some of the best practices that we have or that we know of, especially from the research and from being on the ground, that really do make a difference?
I just want to acknowledge that Maha's child is a big Peppa Pig fan, and
Yes.
I'm a huge fan of Peppa Pig.
Yes.
And glad to have Peppa Pig represented in our conversation.
Lovely.
I feel awful because I keep interrupting and I have a horrible connection, so I'm going to keep muting until I have something intelligent to say. But I'm not from Egypt.
So I'm sure you were both making a lot of mental connections between what you did yesterday and what Dana was talking about this morning.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think Dana's talk was great, you know, and part of, I think, you know, part of what I think about is just in all the work that we do in media literacy, understanding, you know, we need to constantly realize that both like really bad guys, people who we like almost universally would agree are bad guys, and people who are not bad guys but who are our ideological adversaries, regardless of whatever position you come from, are taking all the lessons that we learn about rhetoric and media literacy and turning them to their own purposes. You know, one of the things, like Sam Weinberg has been doing this terrific work at Stanford about getting people to understand sort of information literacy and things like that. One of the things he observed is like, you know, we have this sort of checklist approach for evaluating truth on websites. And that checklist was just like a list for bad guys to design misleading websites. Like, it was, you know, there are instructions for how to do that. But, you know, and other things like, you know, in the 60s and 70s, you know, people who had political proclivities that align with mine, you know, were really powerful by questioning everything. Questioning everything sort of opens people's ability to you know, accept a wider range of viewpoints. And one of Dana's points is, you know, neo-Nazis, white supremacists have adopted that same approach of, you know, climate change deniers, like, you know, question everything. Don't accept the truth as it's been told by dominant forces in society. You know, be willing to consider a wider range of viewpoints.
Yeah, and then even brand that as critical thinking. Right. So,
well, it is. I mean, it is. It's not, you don't have to brand it. It is critical thinking. You know, in some sort of important way. You know, one of the things critical thinkers do is they don't like accept received wisdom. They challenge things. Now, you know, now from my point of view, those folks are like assembling bodies of evidence that are totally unwarranted. But you know, any rhetorical strategy that we've devised to, that I could devise to advance my ideological agenda, my opponents can use to advance their ideological agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like we have a century of history with signals media, and we get more and more powerful. More and more powerful techniques of understanding how to persuade with signals media. It's totally awesome in 2008 when Obama learns how to use that signals media to become the first African-American president. And it's devastating when, Russians learn how to use, a lot of the same strategy, not the same strategies, but strategies that are coming out of the same body of knowledge to advance their political agenda in 2016. Yeah. That's my...
Well, I think some of the broader questions, however, are, what will media be? What is media, right? And that is one of the questions, that, of course, that Facebook is facing now, right? Are we a media company? That was certainly not the original intent, but, what is media and how it's being used and how content is being created, manipulated, analyzed. And, one of the things I think that came out of our session yesterday that was really important to this conversation is, owning that data. How is that data being used, and to what message will be delivered with that data? And interesting, we can all have the same data sets, but we all come to different conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
And so deciding which conclusion or which truth you choose to propagate is something that is, I think that was a part of the message that was given this morning.
And even taking it further from, Howard Rheingold's crap detection framework, we have to go even farther. Like, how do you tease out when it's, the whole illness of Hillary Clinton campaign, and how to tease out where the truth lies?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a problem in assuming that critical thinking on its own was ever going to get us anywhere. I think it's not. We have to not be value neutral, right? So we need to question whether whatever it is we're doing is incorporating, first of all, thinking about social justice when you're doing something, and whether you're trying to question yourself. I think what's missing with the kinds of the neo-Nazi type of things, they're not questioning themselves. They're confirming their own biases, and you can always do that. And we do that too. Like, even we probably think we're right too, but there might be some things that we're not. And so it's the questioning self and having that social justice orientation.
Uh-oh, did we lose her?
No.
Okay.
But I don't know. Professions of love for Chris seem like a totally worthwhile use of our time as well. I'm completely in favor of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing, I don't know, the media health piece was actually one of the pieces where it wasn't totally clear to me that, Dana's sort of position is something like, there's a group of folks who sort of lay the groundwork for this to become a media story, and it becomes a media story because of that groundwork. That seems sort of true, but it also seems like, when you have the two oldest presidential candidates, in a long time, going together, and one of them passes out at a major event, like in the absence of all that groundwork, that's, there's not a good counterfactual there. That still could have just been the two New York papers might have published the exact same thing, kind of without all that laying out. It's hard to know.
Mm-hmm.
Or being, now it's probably the case that like networks are more. It's not, it seems very likely to me that networks are better at mobilizing that evidence if they're prepared for it in the way that she's describing, like, Facebook, people know how on Facebook to take those covers from the New York Daily News and circulate them and have sort of arguments at the ready around them. Yeah, it's, a lot of this is sort of hard to know new with the technology. I mean, a lot of this seems, I experience the moment we're living in seems to me like very closely aligned with various kinds of reconstructions that we've had in American history at various times, where we make forward steps towards equality. You know, there are white supremacist structures that are excited to push back and move backwards against those changes. Like they have different media, you know, they in one generation they had, you know, the first film strips and Birth of a Nation and all that, and they've got Pepe the Frog now, and but ultimately it's a matter of learning with each generation how people use media to convince one another, and you know, trying to band with people who you think are doing the right things to you know, educate people about those strategies to use media and to persuade them. I mean, you know, the other thing that's happened, I was thinking, you know, I mean, a classic retort to Dana's argument about the dangers of some of this might be like, in the end, there's some pretty good evidence, you know, maybe that, or people would make a strong argument that the best antidote to terrible speech is more speech, because ultimately good speech is going to win out over. I was thinking of like the Air Force, you know, one thing that went viral in my networks was the Air Force Academy superintendent.
Oh yeah.
You know, I just can't imagine one of the major service academy members, you know, at any point over the last 60 years giving such a forceful statement. And you know, that really positive speech is in reaction to hateful speech.
I think, Faye, you need to run to get your ride to the airport.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to jump in with Chris's question. He wanted to see what your thoughts might be on some of the recent issues with deplatforming whilst white supremacists and regulating social media. And I think Dana hinted at that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think she had a few points. You know, one of which is it is very difficult to it's very difficult to censor to engage in any kind of automated censorship, because you know, for a couple of reasons. Faye had to go to the airport. You know, why doesn't censorship work? One is you can just like, you know, change meaning. And so you can just continually refine your code so that people can communicate the same kinds of messages without using the words that you've algorithmically regulated. You know, there's also a sense that like trying to figure out where to draw that line is really hard. That, you know, one of the things that, you know, conservatives did really effectively was when Facebook started making some efforts to, you know, control hate speech in feeds. They said, well, now you're you know, suppressing conservative content. So it's you know, those kinds of things are sort of thorny issues. Someone else asked what I thought was a great. So it sounds like one of the things they're wrestling is strategic silence, when not to engage in conversation about a topic, and saying, look, you know, we did this with suicide, we did this bulimia. Somebody, you know, asked a question on Twitter that I thought was really savvy, is like, so one thing you might do is have a strategic silence around the KKK and neo-Nazis and white supremacists. And they said, well, like, isn't that strategic silence exactly why people were surprised by the rise of Trump? Is that we had like stopped covering KKK rallies, we'd stopped covering, you know, by making that invisible, we didn't have enough of a public conversation about how powerful and the growing power of those forces in our country. You know, I mean, it's pretty hard to decide what to do.
Yeah, and just to add to that really quickly, sorry, that, I mean, the whole idea of deplatforming and banning free speech to a certain extent is something that is done differently across the world, right? So I'm from Germany, where we have a pretty strong stance against it is hatred towards Jews, it's neo-Nazi propaganda. Then we are able to, by law, take things down, and we have different ways of engaging with the whole fake news propaganda machine that is Facebook sometimes, with different laws within the European Union. And I'm never really sure if that, and I guess that's something that we always all struggle with, is whether that does really any good, whether when to be silent, when to be not silent, when to take something down, when to not, because those lines are always so blurry that you're not really sure what to make of this and when to engage somebody, when to convince somebody. In Germany, there's this whole argument now after the election whether to actually move steps towards the alt-right and to engage them and to win them back. But that also means like to engage in their narratives and in their beliefs, which are truly full of hatred and full of things that you don't really want to enhance and don't want to amplify.
I guess,
you know, I'm not hearing anyone talk. I'm going to say something very quickly, and then Kate, you can go. I was just going to say, it's always about whether you will listen to them, but it's never about whether you might try to understand how they got there. I don't seem to hear people trying to understand how this happened. Like, where did we go wrong? That this kind of thing keeps happening. Mm-hmm. I always feel like we're doing something wrong. We can't just say that they're doing something wrong, and we should try not to listen to them or decide whether we should give them a voice or not. But I think we should question why we're not going through. And this happens like in a lot of us in our actual families, right? Like we can't get through to people who are more conservative in our own families. Anyway, sorry, Kate, you had a question.
It wasn't so much a question, but actually from what you just said, Maha, is that I don't know if you've seen it, but in Dana's keynote, I think it's probably in the questions and answers, she's talking about people's values and how people come to decide on something based on their framework, and their framework is based on their values and experiences and so on. And so like what we have in terms of, just speaking to people in our own families who might be more conservative than we are, they come with their own, biases, their own values and experiences themselves. So it's really difficult to have those kind of conversations. But actually what I was going to say was that when I was with the Internet Society a couple of weeks ago, this topic around regulation came up again and again and again. And what was really interesting was that there was, I don't know exactly what the age range was, but the youngest person that was there was 14 years old. And the oldest person was probably, the oldest probably in their 80s. So there's a huge kind of scope of the kind of conversations that we're having about the same issue of regulation. And it was really interesting to hear the sort of techno solution that was presented to us by sort of the older folk who had made all these amazing contributions to the internet, whether that was creating the internet or whatever it was. And then there was kind of the younger crowd, and we were kind of talking more about, this is a social issue. These aren't technical solutions. And when we have social issues, then of course, then there's a lot of political elements that come into it. And as Christian just said, I mean, this problem is worldwide, but how we deal with them is kind of nationwide, right? So how Germany deals with neo-Nazis is going to be very different to how the UK deals with, our mass immigration and all those kinds of like hate speech. It's what's the answer? I mean, regulation is probably not. The internet is built, well, the World Wide Web was kind of built on, values of openness and free speech, and who gets to decide who should be suppressed and who shouldn't be. That's all I got to say.
One of the famous 25 under 25. So congrats to that again.
Thanks.
Some very interesting conversation. I'm not really sure what I have. I don't think I have anything substantive to blow your minds, but there were some questions that came up as I'm listening. And one of the things that came to mind when the whole family thing was mentioned, I kind of see the family as a microcosm of society in general, because we're all part of a broader family. So we're concentric circles. We've got our family, we've got our neighborhood. Within our neighborhood, we're in our city. In our city, we're in a broader area, countries, and so on. And it does seem very daunting when we look at it either from a global perspective or even from the country's perspective, because my views in Massachusetts might not be the same views as somebody in Arizona or Florida. And even within Massachusetts, I'm pretty sure that my close geographic area is not the same as other geographic areas. So I do think that it's a human to human type of connection. And the reason why some messages resonate with groups of people, be they on the left or the right side of the political spectrum, is because somebody is making that sort of connection with them at the human-to-human level. At least that's my my hypothesis. Another thing that's sort of a parallel, kind of reminds me a little bit of the anti-vaxxers, and, you know, can you really curtail free speech rights? And I'm thinking, well, can you really curtail personal freedoms, like the freedom to not vaccinate yourself? But then what harm are you doing in society in general if you don't, if you curtail that kind of, you know, action or speech or whatever? I don't have an answer to that, but that's what sort of came to mind.
Yeah, you know, I mean, another thing that I think, one thing that's potentially disturbing to me too, is the idea that, you know, everybody, you know, that we seem to all be able to make a safe assumption that everybody who's involved in the connected learning community is like roughly aligned with a liberal ideology. I mean, and that probably is mostly true. You know, but like part of the reason that we're all here is that we want people to be able to, you know, have informal learning experiences that connect to their out of school learning experience, you know, in school learning experiences, those kind of things. Like, you know, if you come from a part of the country or a neighborhood or a family, you know, that believes in the sanctity of life from conception, or who believes strongly that the Second Amendment, you know, or limited government or other things like that, like, you know, if none of the people from the, you know, like, there's a whole set of viewpoints that I consider sort of totally legitimate within political discourse that I disagree with. And I would want the kids of those families to be able to have access to the ideas from the digital media learning, connected learning community. You know, how do we make that possible, you know, while also, but I, you know, and I'm also comfortable being like, but like, you know, Nazism is right out. You know, white, like extreme examples of white supremacy are right out, and sort of drawing some of those lines as well. But like, it's, you know, I don't know. I do a lot of sort of teacher education things, and have done a lot in history education and stuff like that. And I always try to think of to myself, like, you know, somewhere in another part of the country, there's a group of teachers and educators who are sitting around who believe very different things than I do about, you know, how our society should be organized. But we should be able to, you know, conclusions about what good teaching and learning looks like that accommodates those differences. I don't know, that's sort of part of what, you know, there should be something concerning about the fact that these ideas, which don't seem like they're necessarily inherently political, you know, it's not necessarily an inherently political idea that, you know, if you are super into fan fiction, there should be some way of weaving those ideas into your academic identity. That only people who are, you know, virulent Hillary Clinton supporters in 2016 would be, you know, excited to discuss that.
One thing that resonated with me that you said, AK, was this personal relationship, and that method of convincing people who are known to you and who trust you. Maybe there was this, I'm not sure if it was an academic study, but there was this experiment of people from a news agency in Germany who basically faked Facebook profiles and were lurked into those alt-right communities, and the amount of friendship requests that they got and the amount of support they got from this community, the self-supporting, self-sustaining community of people who just value each other's very strange viewpoints from my point of view. But this bubble that they create and that they reinforce and reinforce and reinforce is something that you probably can only pop if you really have a deep connection and trust with someone. And even then it gets tricky.
I'm gonna probably go to one of the other sessions. It was super nice to chat with you all. Thanks for spending some time in the hallway with me. Great to meet you all. I look forward to staying connected.
Well,
Thank you so much for taking your time, Justin. We really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you. And yes, Dana's keynote is up, so I found it. So if people watching want to watch it, I'll tweet it out right now.
Yeah.
And Christian, if you have to get going too, we can keep going with the conversation with the folks that are virtual. And
another 5 minutes. So I'm a little late into a session, so I might as well just stay for another 5 minutes because I like this.
Oh, were there bits in there, Christian, from Dana's or from the conference workshops that you did yesterday that really connected with you?
Yeah, I mean, yesterday in the workshop we tried to ask lots of, I think, like how to design tech to solve problems, basically, and I somehow disagreed with that, or not disagreed. I questioned the underlying hypothesis that you need to design tech in order to do good. It was the workshop with Justin and Mimi Ito on equity by design in learning. So from my point of view, I mean, I'm on the fence somehow, because I think that designing tech to solve a societal, larger political problem somewhat doesn't feel right.
Yes.
I think we also, or at least complementary to that, yeah, solutionism is just about what I was going to hint at, yeah. So, but, and not going to go to the root of the problem in that sense, and believing that the tech is going to do good if we just design it right. That, I think, was strongly shown not to be the case in the keynote that we just had. And I wish we had the keynote and then the workshop, to be honest, and I'll have to digest that somehow.
I was just noting that last year, just Christian was on site, Chris G was virtual, I was here, and we were discussing what are those weird people talking about apps for emotions and for empathy and things like that. So we're still talking about that, and apparently people still think it's a good idea to consider these things. But so the work, what was the work? So this was a workshop that you and Justin were doing?
No, the workshop was done by Mimi Ito and Justin.
Mimi Ito and Justin,
Yeah.
right? I did hear about that on slide. And so you were questioning the point about using tech to solve the wider problems.
One of the guiding questions for group discussion hinted at the idea of building tech to solve a problem that is actually deeper rooted in society, and we had lots of discussions right about that. And yeah, and I don't think we. And I see somehow where those people are coming from that say, well, we have to engage the, what is it, GAFA, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple. So to engage with them, we need to speak their language. We need to build stuff with them so that it gets better and not as harmful as it is. I get that somehow, and it seems logical, but also designing the tech in order to solve a problem that we wouldn't have without the tech just doesn't feel right as well.
It's an interesting sort of philosophical position. You know, the technology will be our savior in a sense. We're trying to offload things that should be done by a human to technology. So this idea of becoming more efficient at doing things through tools and technology has permeated to our society to a point where it's actually really ridiculous how we're trying to apply society to solve social ills. And with that, AK killed the discussion.
No, I think we're just playing with some of the links people are putting into the chat window.
Oh my God, I'm gonna start banning laptops and these things. I mean, one more time.
The ones who have PhDs have only 1 second to post a link. The ones who aren't doing their PhD can take about 5 seconds to post a link. That's the competition going on right now.
That's a research observation.
Do I get a badge if I do it?
I know. No, we don't need no stinking badges.
Chris G is saying we got here because of innovation as a value on. It's not on that is able to neuter. Did you mean to say neuter? Regulations, policy, laws.
I do
okay,
like.
I don't know what you're trying to say, Chris G.
Because
People get to say innovation, and that lets them get away with pretty much anything.
Yeah.
Yes.
This reminds me of Roland Moe a couple of years ago at one of the Innovate conferences where they had the innovation something. And I know Christy worked with him in one of the years. But anyway, it was all about like whoever said that innovation was necessarily a good thing all the time. And the same with like open, anything really. That we make these, we use these words that are not necessarily positive, and we use them with a positive connotation, and then keep going that way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in Arabic, there's one of the understanding of innovation is something that is Islamically not good, because it means like you're making stuff up and attributing it to the holy book or whatever. So that's like you're innovating and pretending that that was the original thing, and that's not a good thing. So.
That's how a lot
and how did the word like disruption become positive, right?
It's funny, but that's how a lot of products are sold. You know, if you look at the literature, the handout, the product sheets, and you talk to any salespeople, especially at any conference that's supported by vendors, you tend to hear a lot of this. And some of it is management speak. And, you know, coming from an MBA background, I sort of hear this. I'm like, okay, but you're not really being critical about this. You know, you're using these words, but what do they mean?
And innovation for innovation's sake is just like open for open's sake, just, yeah, meaningless. Anyway, maybe what I'll do is just stop the broadcast. Doesn't mean we won't have a continuing conversation, but we'll just stop the broadcast at this point and continue the after hours chat.